in Dune Part 2, how it ends is so drastically different from the source material. And I actually didn't like the fact that it was kind of open-ended. It's just confusing when you hear Denis Villeneuve talk about his adaptation, because he views Dune as a self-contained story. He doesn't like the fact that it's called Dune 3, that some people were calling it Dune 3 or Dune Part 3. He said before that he doesn't think of it as a trilogy, but that Dune Messiah is going to be its own unique story. But what he accomplished doesn't really align with what he said, because Dune actually isn't very self-contained, because a lot of people at the end of Dune Part 2 thought that he must be doing Dune Messiah now because you left it so open-ended. You left it to where it was pretty heavily sowing seeds for the next story when it was cutting to Paul and Irulan and Chani storming off into the desert. People just had the conclusion from that, oh, he must be doing Dune 3 then. And there was this huge conversation about it. And of course, Dune Messiah is happening. And of course, that's what people were talking about, because it wasn't a definitive end. And at least in the source material, yes, it's not the end of the story, but it is the end of that arc. And then we jump forward 12 years into Messiah. It didn't feel like a conclusion when she just storms off. And to me, it didn't seem consistent with her character, because she didn't seem like she was upset with the fact that her people were going off into ships to wage war across the galaxy in the name of Muad'Dib, so much as she was clearly upset about Paul announcing his marriage to Irulan. She seemed more upset about that's the reason why she stormed off into the desert. For me personally, I don't feel like her character as portrayed in the film would feel that way. I think definitely she'd be more upset about what was happening to her people, because they made her aware of the religious manipulation of the Bene Gesserit, and her awareness from that Paul was accepting the mantle of this manufactured Messiah that leads to her people going to war. So it's really hard to accept then that this person was really upset that Paul was announcing a marriage alliance to Irulan. I just feel like, aren't there more important things happening? Don't you care about other things more than that? It's very odd. And Denis Villeneuve confirmed that she was heartbroken over Paul's choice to marry Irulan, which is very clear in the book that it is purely for political reasons, that Irulan is wife in title only. That is it. She will not have a shred of affection from Paul, not even a glance that has a softness to it at all. Nothing. Chani gets everything in that regard. She is essentially the most powerful woman in this situation. It was just made ever so clear that the only reason Paul was instituting this marriage is to have some amount of peace and order, and by keeping with the established forms of this feudal society. It did sort of undercut it when the great houses still refused to accept Paul's rise to the imperial throne. That doesn't add up to the source material either. There's a lot of things in the conclusion of Dune Part 2 that are very questionable, and that's one of them. He has control of the spice. The great houses definitely shouldn't be questioning anything. If you have the Spacing Guild in your pocket, then the great houses have to fall into line. So there's no choice for them in this matter. It's literally the one who controls the spice controls the universe. And that's how Dune Part 2 begins, with the line, power over spice is power over all. But the end kind of contradicts that. They made it seem that the Fremen are going to war because the great houses don't accept Paul's authority. But when it comes to Chani, you're asking people to be, I guess, heartbroken, as Denis Villeneuve said, that she's heartbroken, and you're asking the audience to want them to remain split up. Look at what's happened to your people, and now he's just announced this political alliance, this marriage alliance. Go off into the desert. That's what you were asking the audience to feel. And earlier before then, Paul already knows, I guess, what's going to happen. And he does say that she'll come around. That was kind of a throwaway line there, and it seems contradictory at the moment, but his visions kind of are iffy at times of what is shown and what actually occurs. We see possibilities, so there is precedent for that. But how is that going to happen to where it makes sense? That it makes sense for the character as you portrayed her to be. So it's hard to really trust that statement. And no one knows what Villeneuve is going to do. I know people say to trust Denis. I just can't trust him. There's things that I really like about his work and his adaptation. I love the visuals, even though sometimes I would like to see more of a upscale opulence when it came to the Emperor. But by and large, this was definitely a great interpretation of Arrakis, and Getty Prime was awesome. Fade Rotha. I loved Duke Leto. I loved Duncan Idaho as he was portrayed. And I love, for the most part, how Paul was portrayed. Apart from the relationship with Chani, I have many things that I like and applaud about his adaptation. But then also, I just have these issues. I do not like the way Lady Jessica was portrayed in Dune Part 1 as well. In Part 1, she's very emotional and weak at times in her portrayal. And there was just so much more to her character that was missing. It's a great disservice to her character. And the way Alia was portrayed, that broke my heart too. I get it to a degree, obviously, of the difficulties in film adaptations and handling that. And if they decided to not do the time jump, I mean, that was an unfortunate consequence. But I really wish there was more time taken for the Water of Life ceremony for us to really understand what was going on with Alia and basically the horrors of what just happened. We don't really see any of the consequences when it comes to Alia's point in that. And Jessica is just straight up displaying traits of an abomination. So it was almost like, oh, you're trying to fuse the two arcs together. I don't know, it's very confusing. Not saying it wasn't good. I mean, from a film standpoint, it's compelling and it was a much better performance, at least from the film perspective. I think she was better in Dune Part 2. Lady Margot was great though. I thought that was perfect portrayal, especially of her powers and usage of the voice. Whereas Lady Jessica is just straight up using the voice in front of everyone in public, and they don't do that. They don't allow that power specifically to be known to such a degree. So yeah, there's some things that I was disappointed in, of course, with the omission of the Spacing Guild. There's a lot of things. So I can't say that I have trust in him. My hope is that Dune Messiah will incorporate elements of Dune that we were missing. And in terms of Paul and Chani's relationship, I hope that there is that dynamic of Chani coming to realize what it is like inside Paul's head and what he was seeing, that he doesn't have a choice, that the jihad was going to happen whether or not he was there. Even if he were to die, it would have happened without him, or even to a more destructive degree because he wouldn't be there to control it, that they just needed the mystique of the Messiah, and that's it, to wage war. So I'm hoping that some elements can be integrated. And another thing that's kind of been a rumor that's been swirling, that we're not sure or not, but has been reported by some, is whether or not Rebecca Ferguson will be a part of Dune 3. I hope so, but for reasons that I don't know will happen. And I hope that she will be there just so she can add elements that were missing from Dune Part 2 and bring that into Dune Messiah. So it's funny, I don't want this to be a hybrid of Messiah and Children of Dune. I want it to be Messiah, but I also want to have those elements incorporated that we were missing from the previous film. When it comes to Lady Jessica and Alia, I hope that there's some elements there that we were missing from their relationship. We're missing her entire origin almost. They really didn't showcase what Alia was like, what she was going through, what really happened to her when Lady Jessica was going through the Water of Life ceremony. And in terms of Paul and Chani, I think Lady Jessica and Chani's interchanges, at least some of that we were missing from Dune Part 2, could also be incorporated in here. Lady Jessica literally has the last line of the Book of Dune, which is history will remember us as wives, when she's talking to Chani. And by the way, what Chani is actually heartbroken over at the end of Dune has nothing to do with what's going on with the politics. She is heartbroken because she just lost her son. And that is made so clear what is really going on, what she's really been devastated by. So obviously they skipped over that, so they don't have that. And probably from that, because she's in a horrible emotional state right now, and she just doesn't care. When she sees that Irulan's very pretty, a question comes into her mind, because she's already so devastated and depressed. And Paul just straight up assures her, you are essentially my wife. She's a title. She's a means to an end, to met out some sort of peace in this moment of great change. And Lady Jessica enforces that because she was essentially Duke Leto's wife in everything but title. So she was there to let Chani know what the deal was. And if we can have some sort of semblance of that, and if Paul makes Chani aware of what's going on with his prescience, what kind of being he is, and to know that he didn't have a choice, he's as much a pawn as anyone else in the grip of destiny, and that his only choice basically is to just pick out the timeline that has the least destructive consequences for his loved ones. But yeah, that's just made ever so clear in Dune Messiah that he comes to realize, was he responsible for the jihad or did the jihad choose him? I think that Chani could be used as a lens to see what's going on in Paul's head. Because in Dune Messiah, of course, it's written that we can see, we are aware of the inner dialogue of the characters. But how is this going to be portrayed in a film format to where you have to see this visually and you have to have characters speak what's going on, what they're really feeling and what their motivations are? We have to see that and hear it. I'm just speaking on pure hope and optimism at this point. If we're going to continue on and having Chani be that lens to see what is really going on inside Paul's head, that could be the method of them coming together again and falling in love and having children as a book fan. I hope that's the case.